I'd like to welcome all of us that are here already to hear Kaarin Slevin speak around costume and how it can affect, or period costume, and how it can affect the performance, particularly for actors and their voice and how they hold themselves. Kaarin has been the head of costume since I was a little whippersnapper 20-something-year-old, well, not even 20-something-year-old at drama school. So we've had a long history of being told how to cut straight, which I still struggle with. But Kaarin has very kindly joined us and comes from her background in costume in Australia and has spearheaded the costume at Toi Whakaari, the New Zealand Drama School in Wellington, since its inception. The costume showcase has to be one of the most beautiful things to witness at Toi Whakaari every year. We get to experience these beautiful costumes that these students create with their beautiful imagination, as well as period and true to form. So it's like this amazing show of lights and costume and sound, and it just sort of transports you into a world and imagination of the creatives that aren't necessarily the ones that are performing on stage all the time. So it's a really beautiful experience and one that I've always enjoyed watching. And Nathan, my husband, has done the lighting a couple of times with Kaarin. So we've sort of all been mixed together on and off over the years. Thank you very much for coming to speak to us, Kaarin. This is the beginning of the EPC community, or Educators in Performance and Communication. And we are sort of joined with Speech New Zealand as a group of communicators or teachers in oral communication around the country. Some of us will even be watching it in recording from overseas in the Netherlands. And so I look forward to sharing that recording with everybody. Thank you very much for joining us, Kaarin. I'll hand it over to you.
Oh, thank you so much, Helena. That's I know it's a long time I've been here. I didn't intend to be here that long, but it's lovely to be reminded of your contribution and Nathan's as well. So I guess I'll share my screen now. Screen, entire screen, share. Yep. And then we'll get this slideshow happening. Right, so that's all groovy for everybody.
Sorry, we can't see a screen yet.
Oh, okay. Hang on. Escaping. Can you see that?
There we go. Now you might want to go into presentation because you've made such a beautiful slideshow for us.
I've tried. Okay, great. And now I can see you down the side.
There we are. That's working. Thank you very much, Kaarin.
No worries. So kia ora koutou. I thought I would deliver this webinar in two halves. So part one is an introduction to me and my work, both as a costumier and as a teacher, because I know all of you are teachers, so we have these things in common. I'm going to talk about some key concepts relating to the craft of making costumes, but then also how costumes can be used. And in part two, we're going to look specifically at corsetry as one example of a garment that has a big impact on the body of a performer. And depending on how we are going, we could pause a little for some questions in the middle, because I know, having delivered through the pandemic, that sometimes sitting and listening for a whole hour can be really hard work online. But we will definitely have time for questions at the end. So, ki te taha a tōku mātua no tiamani oku tupuna. Ki te taha o tōku whaia no horana no atako hoki oku tupuna. I whana mai o, I ahi te reria, kei whakatiki o, e noho ana. Ko Kaarin Slevin, tōku ingoa. I've been working as a costume professional for over 30 years. The nomenclature is ever changing in terms of the work I do. And as it turns out, so is my own name, which makes Googling an interesting pursuit for potential stalkers. I've been lucky enough to work for companies on both the east and west coasts of Australia, creating costumes for actors, singers, and dancers. Freelance career highlights. I was the principal ladies costumier for Disney's Beauty and the Beast in 1995. These are some behind the scenes photos with a Tony Award winning costume designer, Anne Hood Ward. She's there up the top left with a napkin girl. Rachel Beck is Belle. And down the bottom there, you can see me just on the edge, and that was our Babette we're fitting there, and Cordula Albrecht, who was our design associate. And you can see down the bottom right, that was the iconic yellow dress that gets revealed in the kind of namesake song. And that's how they all looked at the end from my program. And there's a plate girl that I didn't make, but Mrs. Potts I did make. So there were lots of object costumes in that musical, as well as the human ones. Anthony Phillips Costumes, it doesn't exist anymore, but they're based in Sydney, and they had the contract for all the big musicals like Cameron Mackintosh, really useful company. So I got to work on Sunset Boulevard with them, making the women's ensemble. So these are some Act One costumes, and just some lovely tailoring from the 40s and some uniforms. So after years of being a seasonal worker for this company, I accepted a full-time role as a women's cutter at Opera Australia in 1997. And these are just some photos just to show you some of the range. Like, we would have quite avant-garde things really for opera singers. This is a character called Bercy from Andrea Chenier. We would do also operetta, so not just the classical kind of big operas or Wagnerian operas. This is, operetta, the lovely kind of, early teen silhouette. And then lots, I would spend almost entire years where all I would make would be 18th century shapes. This is Marcellina from the Marriage of Figaro. And if I had $1 for every production of Marriage of Figaro, it's one of the great crowd pleasers in the repertoire. And, things like Gilbert and Sullivan, I'm sure you can see the film that has inspired perhaps these ocean-going costumes from HMS Pinafore. And actually, and I look across now at what Opera Australia are doing, they're doing a lot more musicals. I had the great honour, privilege to work on Star Wars while it was filming in Sydney. This little top worn by Natalie Portman, I must have made, scores of them. So they all get destroyed at different stages of destruction. And then there's always a stunt double that needs to have a pair as well. And I spent a couple of weekends making Baby Jedi. So that's always nice to share that with the students, even though when you look on IMDb, as my son tried to, you can't really find my name because I was a casual worker. The opera wouldn't release me for professional development. Anywho, very lucky to work for ABC television on and off. There was one great show we did called Outback House, which was like putting modern people on a sheep station out in the middle of nowhere and pretending it was 1860. So there was a whole family living in this. He was the landowner, and you can see the lady in blue at the back there. That was the overseer and his wife. And the family had 3 young female children. So I did the corsetry for all the women for Outback House. And then these 2 in the front, they were, I think, the head shepherd and his partner at the time. She was employed as a scullery maid, and they decided that they were going to get married on the show. They told the producers. So this outfit I made for our bride. This is what they got married in on Outback House. So that was a lot of fun and something that doesn't come along very often. I began teaching in 2004 for TAFE New South Wales, and I did my certificate 4 in workplace training and assessment around about the same time I was working on these critters. I love showing this to my students because they would have seen this stuff when they were children. And I stress that I'm not the genius behind the engineering of B1 and B2. I'm just a pair of hands helping to put the pajamas on the bananas and the rat in the hat. And I can tell you that I really came to appreciate the comfort of actors making these costumes. So I moved to Aotearoa, New Zealand in 2005, and as a happy coincidence, Toi Whakaari had a new diploma designed to train costume technicians that had just been approved by NZQA. I was appointed as senior tutor costume, and I set about fleshing out the unit outlines, and we had our first intake of students in 2006. And when I'm lucky, my professional development can involve some high profile projects, but mostly my time is now devoted to teaching. And I'm in the privileged position to be delivering a course I've had the ability to shape and adapt over the years. So as, oh, there we go. As Elena talked to you earlier, one of the challenges of being a costume construction course within an institution known mostly for actor training is visibility. The annual costume showcase was created to focus on the achievement of the costume students. We wanted to give them and our audience the opportunity to see their work presented in a setting that was more than a catwalk experience. Starting with the costume and a model chosen by the costume student, we then use light, sound, and movement to create mood and some kind of narrative or intention for the character. The solo costumes shown in the showcase we call major works. In their final year, costumes construction students are given the opportunity to explore an area of costume of their own choice. The students have a budget of $300 and the project is completed over 8 months. And I'm here to tell you that that budget has kind of been static for, for almost as long as I've been there. Within the curriculum, this is called an independent research project, and the following slides are an example of that research. The learning outcomes involve the student generating a project proposal, demonstrating their advanced realization skills, and managing a construction process independently. We start with them choosing an existing design, and this can be any kind of figurative painting or drawing, from historical portraiture to something like this, which is fan art based on the character of Cruella de Vil, which is a Disney property. The students begin by imagining the costume in 360 degrees. They will be responsible for everything in the image from head to toe, and occasionally the prop items as well. The students use a variety of methods to explore potential construction options. In this case, using a half-scale mannequin is a way to see the pattern emerge without using meters of calico to make a toile or a mock-up. The student can use skills learned earlier in the course. In this example, stamping the Dalmatian spots onto delustered polyester Duchess satin. We have a number of fittings, including a lighting test. And finally, all the elements come together on the stage for the costume showcase. And you can see there, this student made a prop that would do fake smoke, so the baby powder cigarette, glued the nails on the gloves, and yeah, that's a photo of the whole ensemble. And then there's Izzy was one of our acting students that year, and there she's all frocked up as Cruella. We also show the work of the first year students, originally made to fit the costume students themselves. These ensembles are modelled by their peers from the other courses. Creating these ensembles requires all the key competencies of costume construction. We start from the inner layers and work out, investigating what engineering is required to achieve a particular silhouette. We use historical shapes as a foundation for this unit, and every year the era is different. The students complete the costume by creating a wire and buckram headdress or hat, and often another accessory such as a fan, parasol, or ruff. What started as an active way to display student achievement has become a research question for myself and colleagues who have contributed to the showcase. We started to pay attention to something that all of us have experienced as children when our games involve dressing up. The way you can be transformed into someone else by changing your clothing. For the models wearing the major works, mostly students are student actors, but not always. They are using the way the costume feels and how the costume allows them to move to inhabit a character that has no dialogue, no environment, or other objects to interact with. And over the years, we've come to see this process as costume-led creation of character. So these are some key ideas I wanted to introduce to you. We may be familiar with the role of the costume designer and the important visual ideas that can be communicated through the design of costume. but perhaps less so with how a costumier can realize a conceptual piece of art and engineer a garment with a specific performer in mind that goes beyond good fit or faithfully making it like the picture. We may be familiar with the physical craft or technique of a performer, but perhaps less so with the way a performer can incorporate into their performance the physical experience of the costume they are wearing. So, understanding how the costume is making its contribution to the storytelling means that we can focus on each part of the relationship and ensure that one side is working in harmony with the other. A costume executed badly does not do justice to the design ideas behind it. A costume that is uncomfortable or unintentionally unwieldy makes the performer's job more difficult. So, this is the ideas that I've come to try, or I'm learning how to express. So thank you for being some test audiences here. So the idea of costume as a key to unlock character, providing a way for a performer to see themselves as a character they are inhabiting. So seeing is believing. Having been in hundreds of fittings over the years, I can tell when a costume is working for a performer when they stand differently in front of the mirror. For the designer as well, the fitting is the first time we encounter true proof of concept, even though it is common these days for the face of the performer to be artworked into the costume design renders. So the actor being able to see themselves as this thing that they've been working with in production, something starts to happen for them. So garments also physically interacting with the body of the performer and being the foundation of a movement language, feeling character. Watching costumes in rehearsal, I can see performers physically interacting with their clothing, adjusting their gait, the way they sit and stand to accommodate what can at first feel like an impediment or alien. And you think now of a floor length skirt, bustles, armor, things like that. But with practice, the unfamiliar becomes natural. Providing rehearsal garments as early as possible is the key to feeling character. And this final point is probably something that is quite recent. So, thinking of costume as a work uniform. The reality for performers means that their working day requires them to be able to access emotions and strive for a performance that feels truthful. This can take its toll, and performers are now more mindful of their personal processes and the need to leave their work behind them at the end of the day. There are exercises to help performers tap in and out of character, and the need and benefits of intimacy direction, proper fight and dance calls, and the understanding of what health and safety looks like for a performer has transformed the performing arts as a workplace. Costume can also be used to help distinguish between being at work and being finished for the day. So, whether you are playing the characters of Romeo and Juliet in 1968 or in 1996, whether the design is contemporary to the text or contemporary to the time it was filmed, the job of the actor is still the same. How does it feel to be at a ball and to meet someone new? And how does what you are wearing help you express that? Costume can help actors embody iconic characters, often played by many others in the past. We know the key visual attributes of the Batman that distinguish him from other characters in the story. But what must it feel like to wear the cowl and the cape? For each actor who has portrayed the Batman, the challenge is to find their unique expression. Costume can help actors embody true life characters where historical context is important to understanding their story. These costumes are often created to be more like the layers of clothing worn by people of the time, and so can help with an experience of the era for the performer as well as the audience. Great effort is spent in achieving the detail of historical costume, attention to cut and fabric, but also artwork and breakdown to show the interaction of character and environment. In a way, the visual impact of these costumes is experienced twice by the audience. First, we encounter them as part of the mise en scène, but then we encounter their full impact as the performer draws upon the physicality the costume supports. However, historical accuracy can also become a visual straitjacket. Costume can shine new light on classic stories by using the silhouette of the era where the text was first created, but then use a modern sense of color and texture to reveal new layers and themes. This is the genius of good costume design, matched with the technical expertise of a costumier who understands cut and historical shapes. Both elements are working together for the performer who needs to find life in language that comes from another era. A visual focus on character and less concern for period accuracy allows classic stories to be inhabited by fresh faces. The environment and the silhouette are still anchoring the story in time, but the audience can see more of themselves reflected in the telling. A more diverse group of actors can experience wearing these shapes and styles as they wield their craft and so grow in the range of characters they can portray. Even a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, costume is providing a foundation of reality for actors needing to work with other technology like CGI to tell a story. When the environment around you is endless green screen, the weight and feel of what you are wearing can help you maintain focus and relationship with others in your scene, even if that other person is someone in a lycra jumpsuit with a bunch of ping pong balls attached. So that's kind of the end of this bit. And I wanted to just check in with you before I launched into Corsetry. If there were anything that I'll just stop the share. If there was anything in that you wanted to talk further about, or that was sparking something in you and your relationship with costume in your lives, because I'm sure you've all got a performance background of one kind or another.
Kaarin, I've definitely felt as a production manager the importance of creating a workplace costume for performers. Working at Takirua, we did a lot of very deep and personal work with a lot of emotion and a lot of historical pain in that. And so the costume was very important to separate that rawness that the performers were exhibiting for the audience. And I have in the past had experiences where a performer will use a piece of their own clothing or even their undergarments maybe being their own, and any part of it being theirs brings them into it a little bit too much when it's that raw. So I've definitely personally experienced that part. But I also love how you've touched on the way that costume can it be a collaboration with the performer. It's a collaboration of how they hold themselves, how they might speak, etc. I know there's been a lot of apologies, I'm not sure where that's coming from. But somebody in the background has someone chatting. Sorry, if you have someone in the background, could you mute your screen?
It's Rebecca.
Rebecca. Okay. I've muted her. There we go. Thank you. I've heard of many stories of performers who were unaware of how tight the corset would be and how they couldn't breathe and how it changed the way they spoke because their breath was a lot more. They had to take little breaths more often. And so I was thinking about how that might affect the actors that are involved with Speech New Zealand and when they're trying to do their Shakespearean pieces and so forth. And the importance that as teachers we might have in helping them understand what that feels like, putting them in a corset so that they understand how constrictive that can be and how to hold yourself, etc. Because as now we're so used to turning up in our hoodies and in our flip-flops, and that's not quite the same sort of character that you're trying to portray.
Thanks, Elena. That's awesome.
I think often too that I think you said to use the costume as soon as possible, like and I agree with that with props too. Often it's the weight of the costume they're not used to, and all of a sudden they need a lot of rehearsal with the weight that for movement and so forth. So I think yes, as soon as they are able and it's convenient to get into the costume and work with it is good.
It's good if you have a stock, but I would imagine in your teaching environments where you are, you probably don't have access to things like that, would you?
We have a big costume.
Oh, you do? Amazing. Fantastic. Yeah, because it's one of the things I've really noticed working, especially with the first year actors, you know, when they're very new and they love the dress up, like they get that energy from wearing something different to their tracky decks. But it's like it takes a while for them to know that they have to learn how to work in it. It's like almost like they think the petticoat's going to get out of their way, you know,
Yeah.
or I can remember getting students into corsets and then they want to go and eat their lunch and sit like you would, you know, all slumped over and wondering why that was painful. It's like, yes, the garment is asking you to hold your body in a different way. Isn't that interesting? You know, how can you link that to your character? So, and then, but I always love when actors do unexpected things like as a maker, I'm always looking for faults and trying to fix things that might become, you know, a headache for someone in Helena's position as a stage manager or something. But often I need to give things time. I had a beautiful actor who I'd made a costume for I think Capital E. He was going to be a giant in this children's story called Grimace. And he had this little cape that only had one popper, but it could swing around his neck. And I thought, oh, I'm going to have to tie that to the shoulders. And us is like, oh, it's okay. We'll fix it later. And I could see he was working in front of the mirror. And he used that cape later on to reveal this it was like a bunch of rags that he had under his arm, but it was a chicken because he was telling the story of Jack the Beanstalk and a chicken was a part of it. And I love that he'd figured that out in like 15 minutes of just going, what does this thing do? Oh, it can do this job for me. You know, and if I'd been too quick, I would have made that permanent and it wouldn't have had that ability. So I'm always in awe of the performers, how they work with things and then learning one, like the question with the students is, can that be taught? Is that an instinctual thing driven by curiosity? Or can you teach someone to interact with something just like you guys are teaching them with the equipment of their bodies, how they project their voices? Maybe there's a curriculum to be, you know, discovered there, or a set of exercises that can help, you know, reveal it in different people.
That imaginative play again, isn't it? Like when we were children and it would be the tea towel is my hair, you know, like you just,
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
rediscovering that joy of play.
Yeah. And I think the other thing I've really noticed, and maybe this is something that you guys have experienced too, like when you've spent like quite a few rehearsals just trying to drilling on the words, have everyone got the scripts down, and then things can feel a little bit flat, and like to get you just to up to the next level, introducing maybe some hand props, some other things. You know, costume's often a great way to get through the fatigue of those long kind of weeks of rehearsal as you get ready for the, you know, the energy required for opening night. So yeah, having them early enough so that they can learn about the way they need to work in them, but also not give all your energy over too quickly when you're trying to get over the hump of all your tech rehearsals. So, because Helena had shared that you were interested in the corsetry, so the second part I've really focused on that. But I know, well, in the olden days, that probably would have been more specific for the people who identify as women. But, you know, we live in gender fluid times. This has been quite a challenge for me too in my course, where we have a very distinct kind of curriculum between like pattern cutting for menswear and pattern cutting for women's wear. And so, you know, we have lots of non-binary people that we are costuming for now. And actually, just like back in Shakespeare's day, men were paying those female parts. Anybody can wear anything. So I've really taken this on board and tried to make things a little less binary. So hopefully we'll talk through that. So I'll share my screen again, and we shall continue on to the next section. Will we? There we
We
go.
can see it.
Excellent. A brief history of corsetry and other examples of garments that impact the body. So corsetry, obviously number one. So this is about shaping the body to denote historical era. So this is the silhouette I was talking about before. This is very important to costume designers. So we can, I've read one book that described corsetry as molding the wax of a woman's body. So, and how we do that technically, I thought I'd talk a little bit about. But also imagining, I've thought about, fashionable restriction, like if we're working in a fantasy genre, which never really existed or is in outer space in, thousands of years in the future, who knows? But the way that we shape our bodies with constricting garments. So this is 1598. This is one of the earliest pairs of stays that fashion historians talk about. That they were a pair of stays in a German museum for Sabine von Neuburg, and they were made with kind of 2 layers of linen, and they're called bents. They're like reeds. If you can imagine like a straw broom, that's what's in casings. So it was kind of firm, but not like overwhelmingly stiff. And then these are a reproduction of what are called the effigy stays, and that's about 1605. So, and I made these. I just made these from a pattern that Jenna Arnold had created before she passed away. And because I know that my students are very interested in historical costume, so I wanted to show them how I can take a historical shape that would probably fit very few humans today and then adapt it for us to make in class. So the effigy of Elizabeth I was restored in 2018. She's like a little dolly, and I think it was an effigy used in her funeral procession. And it was in Westminster Abbey. So this is the mannequin undressed, and these are the stays that they found underneath. And they were examined by Janet Arnold, who thought they were contemporary of Elizabeth's time or at her death. So that's how we get the 1605. And again, they're like the German ones I showed you before, but they have this front opening, which was unusual. You can see there are lots of reeds or bents going in a very straight line down the front of the torso. Queen Elizabeth herself, it was remarked upon, she had a very long body. So it's possible that this was one of her stays because of the shape of it. So this is how I took this shape and I made it for a modern body. And so you can see down the front in the picture of the right, I'm using crin steel for the front busk. If there was a busk, it was usually carved out of like a whale bone, like an actual bone, as opposed to baleen, and we'll talk about that later, or hardwood, that was the word I was looking for. So a piece of wood that can handle being put down a pocket to keep the front of the stays very rigid. So what it's doing is kind of creating a cone shape for the body. And this era is not really about a small waist, it's more about containing the breasts, if anything. And it's a very easy shape to wear. And I've put men in these things as well. And as long as you have the length of the body right, you can see the little tabs or tassets, they splay out over the hips. And so wearing one of these, it's very supportive. You can still expand your rib cage, but you do become aware that your breathing might be less kind of horizontal and more kind of vertical. So you're really using your the lower part of your diaphragm. But I've never met a body shape that didn't look nice in this cone shape. It's very interesting. So the students would make this in their first year because it's the stays are a great way to become comfortable on industrial machinery. It's lots of straight lines, and we use a product that's just a plastic boning. It's sold as synthetic whalebone. That's how it's sold. But whalebone. When we say whalebone, we don't mean the skeleton of the whale. We actually mean the baleen. So this is like for whales that are strainer feeders in their mouths. This is like a keratinous substance, a bit like your fingernails or hair. It's made of protein, but it's quite flexible. So this was then as we start to move on in eras, this is more like a restoration, 1650. So this is another pair of stays. Again, it's starting to get a bit more complex. You can see on the hips that the tabs have started to fuse together. This one actually came with sleeves, and it had front lacing. And it's a beautiful pair of stays. Everyone always swoons over them in historical costuming circles. So I had some pink silk. I had a go at, again, using an extant pattern. And this is one of the very petite costume students that I had who was modeling this for me. So it was a really fun way to test out a shape. But always when I'm doing this, it's because I'm trying to figure out how to refine it in a way that the students can have a go. So this is another shape. So we're moving on now. We're into the 18th century. So we got this big triangular piece in the front of the stays now, which was called a stomacher, but we're still pretty much straight lengths of bone. This one, we're back to tabs, but you can see there's no lacing in the front. You would have needed either your sister or a maidservant to get you dressed, but it's still very much a cone shape. And I think it's interesting that this shape of bodice was with us for many hundreds of years, because I think it was a really successful shape. And this is just the pattern, just to give you an appreciation. We call this style of stays a flat front. And you can see the center front here on the left. I don't know if my cursor works. There it is. That's the center front. It's dead straight, and it has, and it's on the straight grain of the fabric, and that's where modern makers would use steel, but a whalebone busk or a piece of wood could have been. And then we've got a bunch of angles. So we're starting to play with the grain of the fabric and the different direction that the bones may lay on to shape the body. They're lots of fun to make these shapes. And then there's a period, as the era, the century is coming to a close, we're getting quite complex in terms of how we make all of the casings, how we do the layers together. There's some exquisite work in terms of craftsmanship. Remember that these are all handmade. These are all sewn by hand. And the guilds of making at the time, it was forbidden by law for women to cut cloth. They were seamstresses. They weren't tailors. So these are all men who were corsetiers and making these amazing shapes that still, stand up today and look incredible. And this is one that, so that's about 1780. So this shape is becoming quite curvy, but it's still what we call the straight front. So there's this part here, the bust of the diaphragm is not really being constricted. That cone shape is still happening, even though we've got a bit more of, pronounced kind of swelling here, but it's still a very comfortable shape to wear. And then, of course, the French Revolution happens and things really change quite radically. On the left here, we've got a pair of short stays. So it's almost like the one on the other slide that has been shortened, because, we're getting the higher waisted dresses of the empire. And underneath things like that are like this thing on the right. So this is a pair of stays. You can see the busk is really clear. It's wide, and it is like having a ruler down the front of your bodice. But the technology now, we've got these triangular gussets here, which is something that really hadn't been done before, and lots of embroidery. So it's still a very tube-like garment, but we're starting to, I think the ideal for fashion then were like the Grecian and Roman statues. So this idea that suddenly the breasts are not forced together and pushed up with that lovely cleavage. They're in a natural kind of arrangement, but separated. I don't know if you could imagine wearing a ruler between your breasts. That would be so uncomfortable. Anyway, it's an interesting shape. I made this for when we did the 1830s quite a few years ago, and it's actually quite hard to fit to different body shapes. And I wondered if that's why it really only lasts about maybe 20 years and then we move on. So this is a great pictorial survey. These are all stays from the Kyoto Costume Institute. So you can see cording being used now. We've moved away from reeds that would have been so old-fashioned. Even the poor whales, like if you can imagine hunting a whale by a sailboat, like it's extraordinary that they could manage to bring down a whale at all, especially, I mean, Indigenous people have been doing it for hundreds of years. But you can see a very early kind of bra-like bustier there, but still this this triangular gusset shaping the bust and this big kind of wide wooden busk down the center front. And it's around about the late 30s, getting into the 40s, where the terminology starts to change and we start using the term corset. And you can see that busk now is starting to refine. It's becoming narrower, less gussets, more like we're incorporating the shape into the seams. And for the first time in the 1840s as well, we get things like metal eyelets at the back of the corsets, and we get a front opening busk. So on the left is just a straight busk like we've seen the other shapes. And then in this 1851 from Victoria and Albert Museum, you can see the busk is split now, which makes it a lot easier to get in and out if you don't have a if you don't have a maidservant. You can get in and out of these by yourself. So as the we're moving out into the 19th century, in the middle of the century, this is when people would have been wearing crinolines. Again, small waists are important, but a crinoline makes your waist look small anyway because you got this massive skirt. But underneath those are these kind of shapes. So they're quite short, and they're still really about supporting the bust, supporting the body of the wearer, but really not the fetishization of waists that we think that they are. Although if you've watched Gone with the Wind, you know, it's a hard thing to avoid. But you can see we've also still got straight bones going up kind of vertically on the body. This is this is when we are in second year in the course, the students make a front opening corset. So this is a pattern that I've developed. It's about 1875. And I just caught Emily. She was wearing her corset proudly to school one day. She made this lovely skirt to go with it. But you can see that it's not an overly waisted shape. But if you can see in the left-hand side too, that there's a bend there in the way that there wasn't in what we call the flat-fronted styles of the 18th century. So, and obviously corsets are more like a half bra, a demi cup, because they're usually finish at nipple level. So you need a chemise or something underneath them to control the top half of the bust. And in this case, you know, Emily's just wearing it as an outer garment, bless her. So this is getting towards the end of the 19th century now, and there's this invention that you can still get called a spoon busk. So this is a massive bit of metal now. It's high tensile steel, and there's a wide kind of bowl at the bottom, and this is trying to suppress the abdomen, because Newton's first law of corsetry is all displaced flesh must go somewhere. And so when you start to really constrict the bottom of your rib cage, the diaphragm there, you're squishing a whole bunch of usually abdominal fat. There's been some complete nonsense written by people as if the fat from your stomach could be shifted over into your hips. Like, that's nonsense. But the you being squeezed top and bottom is more like what it's like in the way you can squeeze toothpaste out of a tube. So this device, the spoon busk, is doing that work. And I wanted to show you, like, so this is a modern busk. You can see how it's curved, so it curves in. And the other thing, the ones that we use in our class, they're more flat. They're called a conical bust, but it's a really stiff piece of steel. So when you sit down on a chair or a stool, it does make your back sit very straight. It's very hard to drive a car wearing one of these things. I found a a bunch of clothing got donated to us from Downstage Theatre, and there was half of a pair of spoon bust stays there that were like a rag. They were eaten by rats or something. So I'd taken a pattern. I haven't finished this research project, but this is a toile model by one of my students. So this is a spoon bust in action. And you can see on the photo on the right, we've got quite a curve now. So and that's the thing I think that people feel the most when they wear this kind of shape, that really accentuates the waist and the hips. You feel it in your diaphragm. You feel it being in your lower ribs, that is being really constricted. So this is the era when people were very much tight lacing, and when people were fainting, and you read all those horror stories. So yeah, the experience of wearing this, you do become very aware of your breathing, because you can feel it up in the top part of your chest, and you could easily hyperventilate if you weren't really grounded and being constant with your breathing. So just to show you the difference between the flat-fronted 18th century and 17th century styles versus the later Victorian, and how that's shaping the body differently. And like I was saying, I often get men doing our course. So I did think, like, why not make a corset for men? These things existed in history. Sometimes they were more like fetish wear, but you can read about dandies wearing corsets in 1840, sportsmen who wanted to have a youthful physique. This is an example of a waist binder from the LA County Museum of Art. So the Madame Doubting, there's a picture there. It's like the top, this one here. So I thought, oh, that's an interesting shape. If I make a corset for a man that has a front opening bust, then that's got all the same learning outcomes as the other one. Maybe I should do that, so that there's a choice for our students, because previously the male students would have to make it for a model, but not themselves, whereas most of the female students always make these things to fit them. And so this is one of my students, Mikkel. We're very proud of Mikkel because he's a prop maker, armor maker. He does a lot of amazing things with technology, like 3D printing. His sewing was quite junior when he started, and this is what he made in second year. I should probably sell this pattern on Etsy or something, try and save for my retirement. But yeah, it was a lovely shape and a great experiment to have the students willing to figure out if this is a thing they wanted to make. And yeah, we make them every year now. Skirts are awesome. As you know, having that long skirt on is nothing more princess than running around the plaza at Toifakari in your 18th century or Elizabethan petticoat. So this is about circa 2020. We must have just come back in the building after learning from home digitally through the pandemic. And I don't know whose little dog that is. That's so lovely that they were in the photo as well. And this is the first year class modeling their 1780s. They've got little rumps under their petticoats. But yeah, just a bit of humble calico. They get to learn about frills and pleats and all kinds of things. And having that extra fabric around your legs, learning how to get up and get down, and walk backwards, and all this swirl about. They're really great for actors to play in. This is the Elizabethan silhouette that we do. So the same corset you saw earlier with a slightly different bum roll and a petticoat. The panniers are really good fun things to play with. They make getting in and out of doorways lots of fun. And of course, at the opera, we would, like I said, spend whole years in this kind of shape. So this is what's underneath something that looks like this image. So this is a different production of Marriage of Figaro. This is the Countess. This is what we call a sack back gown. And one of those long kind of floor length panniers under a shape like this. But yeah, when you have a train like this, as well as a big hoop skirt, that's a great movement challenge for an actor to go on. You all are familiar with cage crinolines. It's a beautiful red one from the V&A Museum. And I love how they compact down quite well. So you can see lots of photos of the time of the ladies going in the stagecoach off to you know, a different town, and the crinolines are tied to the back of the coach because you wouldn't have fitted inside with it. So, you know, working with this kind of shape for an opera singer, the big concern for opera was what we used to call ding dong bell. If the crinoline isn't weighted properly, they move around quite a lot, and it can be very distracting when a powerful aria is being delivered. But they're, again, lots of fun, and a good way to pad out your stage with your 48s usually is a chorus in a full opera. And then, of course, bustles. So there were two bustle eras. This one on the left is the later bustle era, which was quite enormous, like, you know, quite square. But they're just these are steel now. So by the end of the kind of 1800s, we'd almost fished the whales to death, actually, and it was becoming way too expensive. So there was lots of innovation with steel. As you know, I think 1856 is when the crinoline was invented. So all that steel ends up going into these bustle shapes. And there's a typical dress on the right there to support all that drapery, which is quite a weight. I think one of you was talking about the weight of things. When you're wearing one of these dresses, it's surprising, and it's all at the back. You know, it's all it's all behind you. So I always say when we're working with garments that have a train, that to the actors, you know, you've got to move like a shark. You can only ever move forward. So even if you wanted to go backwards, you have to kind of turn in a circle and walk back the other way. You can't walk backwards. So this is one of the bustles that we make in the course, because it's a great way to show how you put steel under tension to create a shape. And I love this picture, even though I couldn't afford to buy it, but it kind of shows how you sit in one of these things. So of course, with these big garments, you need the proper period furniture, and that's when you have lots of chairs that don't have arms, you have lots of wide benches, and you kind of don't really sit on your sit bones, you're kind of leaning on the side of your thigh because you've got a bunch of steel behind you. And there's some great innovations. Like there were so many gentlemen scientists, it seems, in the late 19th century who were discovering fossils and dinosaurs and ways to make new bustles that could collapse and sit on the bus. But yeah, that's a lovely photo of a actual Victorian woman. There we go. And that's just to give thanks to Mikkel, and you can look at his, that's his Instagram handle. He's a cosplayer, so he makes some pretty kooky characters. And then lovely Emily and Dorothy for letting me photograph them. So now we get to have more questions.
I'm really keen to know about when you've got your costume on and you've got a wig and a hat.
Yes.
So you're coping with the dress and the bustle. You're trying to hook up the undergarment to sit on the edge of a chair.
Yes.
You've still got to manage your hat and your. So again, is it just going through a ritual of putting things on and just walking and experiencing that for a number of days till you get familiar with it? And of course, shoes would have been different too, wouldn't they?
Yeah, totally. So when doing the big musicals, like someone playing Evita, for instance, would have their own wig technician, their own dresser, and actually the role of Evita has, you know, crazy quick, you know, full wig changes. But I'm thinking like a Lady Bracknell now, like a, you know, those lovely Oscar Wilde things. The opera, at the Opera Australia, we had a wig department. They hand knot the wigs, so they were incredible, those women. But I learned too that there's so many blood vessels in your head. When your wig is too tight, people can faint. You can watch them like lose color because the blood isn't moving around. So they've got their own hair in little pin curls, the big wig, and then they'll have the hat. So we have to make them as light as possible, because you're right, having all of that weight on the top of your head is very hard. We can't have the hat cast too much shadow for the lighting. That's a really interesting challenge, even though you usually have lots of footlights, so it's always kind of at the side. But you know that photo I showed you earlier of that was a woman, an actress called Robin Arthur. She was Mrs. Potts. She had a pyrotechnic in her hand, but she got RSI from holding her hand like that for, 8 shows a week, 6 months. So luckily the opera singers, you can only physically sing those big roles every other night. If you're a chorus member, you'll be wearing the big hat and the wig one day, and then maybe you're gypsy princess and something a little bit lighter weight the following day. So it's the at the opera we used to get maybe 2 or 3 piano dress rehearsals, and then there would be 2 or 3 stage orchestrals, a big dress rehearsal, and then you're on. But those people in the opera chorus, they were very used to wearing those big costumes, and I imagine it would be like that for the RSC and for other companies who spend a lot of time in those kind of big period costumes. But I think for the younger actors, it's definitely difficult. I always give them our rehearsal skirts from day one, and then shoes shortly afterwards, because shoes are another thing that really can affect the way a performer stands. You probably find this in your voice projection, like the way that your feet are connecting with the floor affects the whole way that your spine and your head and your posture is. So if you're trying to build your character from your shoes up, then you need that from the beginning, because often what will happen is the actor will get all these lovely things to play with, and like technique goes out the window. If they can hang on to words that they've managed to learn, that's awesome. But then the young ones anyway, they forget all the other things. You have to gradually add the pieces back together once they get the new fun thing. And I think that's when you come to really appreciate those seasoned performers, because someone like Judi Dench, you could throw anything at her and she'll come out on top, no problem, because they have that way of that experience of the weight, and it's not going to throw them. Sorry, it was a very long answer to your question.
I love the idea of the rehearsal skirts and so forth as well, because obviously when you're doing a design, and particularly in Aotearoa where we've got such short design and production periods, it's the idea to just have, a calico skirt that they can put on, a few corsets to get used to, or hats even to put in place to just remind you that they're there and that it's not your everyday wear before the costume jumps in, maybe in a couple of weeks' time as it's being built.
Sorry.
I know a number of teachers have done that for working in our syllabus, and at senior level, when you're taking from 2 different genres, 2 different periods of time, then having a skirt for them to work in, and they've been made out of old sheets. I know somebody had them sheets, and we've made whatever we could, and that was a really good stepping stone. Again, it was trying to get some weight and sense of movement and distance between characters.
Yeah, I was even thinking for the young men, like if you're trying to get someone to be Hamlet or to be Henry V, like even just wearing a collared business shirt with a tie, like something done quite all the way up, can be such a different thing. I mean, unless that person's off to church every Sunday, all beautifully dressed, but that's a really quick way to help a young kind of man feel different and maybe stand a little bit differently when they're wearing that kind of high collar, because you won't always have armor, but even like I've used a life jacket. That was something bulky. We hadn't finished the armor yet, but the actor was practicing wearing like just a regular life jacket because it helped added that bulk in their chest.
Pauline has her hand up.
Sorry, Pauline.
All right, how would you sit with a crinoline?
Great. So a lot of the furniture there was like a bench. So you can usually pick up like the 3rd or 4th hoop. And again, you kind of can lift the crin a little bit, but you are kind of still perching on your side. You can't just go and plonk down in your chair because you can bend them. So, sitting on cushions on the floor is always lovely because you can, sink. And there's that beautiful in the, what was that? The piano, when she sinks down into the mud, because they collapse that way. So you could sit on little cushions on the floor. And I love that bit in The King and I when they're lying on the front and then all you can see is all their bloomers.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's how you kind of pick up the side and you can kind of then, perch on a bench kind of seat.
And toileting, honestly, if you're in a rehearsal all day, you've got 8 or 10 hours of work. I mean, toileting's a huge issue, isn't it? Just because the toilets are so small. It's not that you've
That's
got
right.
space.
It's like being a bride when you've got a big buffet. You know, that's when you need your bridesmaids and a garbage bag. I'm told you can put your whole frock in a garbage bag if you have to go to the bathroom in the middle of the reception. But yeah, having the actors being able to get in and out of them quickly is really important. Like one theatre I worked for, they had buckle fastenings on their waists. Because and even on film, because they can't shoot all day, people need a break as well, and they'll have to get undressed, but then it'll take them a good hour to get redressed, especially if you got all the layers.
I see it in the background, Samantha. You have a mannequin up.
Oh,
I'm intrigued.
yes. It's for a short film that I'm filming next weekend. It's for a caveman film or something. So I've been working on that one.
I was going to say that it's very important to do lots of improv in the garments. I've got a girl doing Cruella de Vil, and I've got this fur that was my mother's. You know those horrible stoles that back in the 60s?
Yes.
So she has to wear that, and I've got a lot, going to the fur shop and buying it, and then, taking it home. And then we talk about the 24-hour life of a character. And I said, Cruella has breakfast, she has lunch, she has dinner. So we're doing lots of improv because also I find the girls are quite gauche and awkward, when you've got them trying to do Oscar Wilde. That really have to spend a lot of time on this corset and the hands and deportment and straight back, and even sitting in a cross-legged, which is a no-no totally. They have to do the really inhabit the character from morning till night. So improv's really, really good, and the sooner you get the costume, they can become the character. Yeah.
Gabrielle.
Just I loved you taking us through the history of the corset. That it's just so interesting. It was wonderful, but it made me think about my mother, because you could have taken it further. In the late 50s, 1950s to the 60s, my mother was wearing a corset, and I remember it, and it was really restrictive. So it's not that long ago.
No, that's right. The Merry Widow, I think the Warner Merry Widow was one of the best sellers, and I think a lot of costume hires still have one or two of those in their store. Yeah.
When my friend's daughter got married, the fashion designer, he was high fashion chap, he said, go and buy a corset, put it under your wedding dress, and you'll look quite gorgeous. So she did. Because you can still buy them, for fun and wearing to parties, and if you want to, just a corset to a party, why not? And suspenders, they look pretty cool. Young ones.
I really appreciated, Kaarin, you sharing something around the men's corsetry as well, or those that identified as men, because I think we often forget around the costumes and period dress for the men. I think about, the extra carving that they'd put under their stockings.
Yes, when they're wearing their breeches.
Yeah. And, the cups of Henry VIII and so forth that were rather pronounced, and how that makes a gentleman or somebody acting as a gentleman character move is very clear. I think about, Tom McCrory when he'd do his movement classes, and he'd tell you to lead with your head or with your chest as you're moving around, and change what part of your body. Very much the same when you're putting on a costume. Where you lead from is affected by how the costume sits on you. So yeah, thank you very much for sharing that.
And what about the male cod piece?
Oh, what a beautiful thing that was. Yes, because it's very hard now to get people to wear them because they feel so ridiculous. It actually can undermine your performance because no one's paying attention to you. They're looking at your cod piece.
Ridiculous.
Right. Well, are there any other questions? Otherwise, I think we've all had a lovely evening of being shared some beautiful costumes, some beautiful thoughts around how it might affect a performer, how it affects a costumier, how we can go through the design of a character's process in different ways, being seeded from different people and as a collaboration. I've learned a lot of things about costume that I still wasn't aware of. I didn't realize that whale bone was actually the area of the mouth. I did think it was a bone carved into the shape. So, you know, you learn something new every day. Thank you again, Kaarin.
My pleasure.
And yeah, it's just been a pleasure to really consider your craft, your expertise, and how that affects performance, how it affects actors, how it affects the general populace of our history as well, let alone how it may have affected in different cultures and different Indigenous societies and their costumes and so forth. So yeah, I really appreciate the time that you've taken to share with us, for giving us seeds of thought and how we might support our students as they endeavour to move their ways through oral communication and performance training with our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you for asking me.
Thank you.
Ka kite anō.
Ka kite.
Thank you.